Uh, as we see, we have a list of folks who are joining us today, and some of the people that you will hear from. It's boots on the ground doing the work, doing the work to make sure that when it comes down to environmental justice conversation and environmental justice action work is actually getting done. We have Eric from Lancaster, PA. We appreciate you, Eric. Thank you for dropping in. I've seen some Ernie from Philly. We got some Philly folks in here. We got Don from Chichester. I know that's going to make Ms. Zulene happy to see some folks from Chichester in the building. That's going to be an extremely important conversation when it comes down to that Chichester, Chester, Pennsylvania, Marcus Hooks area. You definitely don't want to miss that. They will be a part of this conversation in the later half, but this is definitely something you want to jump in and make sure you listen to. And then we have Daryl from Allentown, PA, and Brooklyn, New York City. We appreciate you for joining us. We got Pat from Philly. We got another Philly resident in the building. All right, we're going to give up until about 6:05, and then we're going to jump right into it because we have a very tight schedule this evening. As you can see from all of the promotion to get you all here to be a part of this webinar, we have some amazing speakers that will be a part of this conversation. Shout out to Ms. Zulene. She's in the chat right now. She will be a part of this conversation as well, and that's really exciting to have. And then also just a shameless plug too, tomorrow is the Sustain PHL event here in Philadelphia. So I'm always showing love to Philadelphia organizations who's doing the work. So big shout out to Green Philly. So if you're in the area, make sure you shout out the Sustain PHL event. And I'm Maurice will be there tomorrow as well. And I feel like Miss Zulina will be there, who actually won an award last year at the Sustain PHL event in Philadelphia. So it's about 6:05. About to get started. We got Joanne and Pete from Upper Darby. We appreciate you joining us. We got Carter from Doylestown, PA. We appreciate you for joining us as well. All right. So thank you all again. I'm going to introduce myself and we're going to get right into today's webinar. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. We appreciate everyone who's in the chat. Keep the chat flowing. Keep your questions flowing, your ideas. Please continue to engage as we start this webinar. Thank you so much. But I want to properly introduce myself. My name is POC. I'm actually the host of Eco Word on WRD Word Radio, which is Philadelphia's only Black talk radio station here in the state of Pennsylvania. And on Eco Word, we talk about how, when it comes down to environmental justice, how that intersects in everything that has to do with everyday life with people, when it comes down to housing, when it comes down to food, when it comes down to neglect. This is a conversation that we have every Friday on EcoWord 96.1 WURD. So make sure you check that out. You can find more information at Word Radio as well. Oh, thank you for the flyer. Yes, every Friday from 10 to 11 a.m. And I'm extremely excited tonight and honored to be a part of this webinar. This webinar, again, is entitled Environmental Justice in Pennsylvania. This event is being hosted by Clean Air Council, Clean Water Action, Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania, and EcoPhilly, in partnership with Marcus Hooks Areas a Neighborhood of Public Health and Chester's Residents Concerned for Quality Living, which I said, again, a jam-packed show. Today is going to be an amazing conversation, bringing these groups together to create a space to talk about what is really going on, the real conversation about environmental justice issues impacting communities across Pennsylvania, what is being done to address them, and how you can engage in the fight when it comes down to cleaner, safer water, air, and just a cleaner, safer future. This will actually be taking place. Our webinar will be happening today, Wednesday, October 22nd, from 6 to 7:30 p.m. We're going to go over about 30 minutes. I know we said that we're going to end at 7, but we're actually going to end at 7:30 just to make sure that we get some time for a Q&A. We want to make sure that you are engaging in this chat, but we also want to make sure that you're engaging with our speakers as well. So you will have time past the 7 p.m. mark to actually ask questions to our speakers. So for everyone who wants to stick around, you are encouraged to stick around until about 7:30 so we can get that Q&A done. And again, for those who just joined our webinar today, the only thing that I ask is that you are respectful to our speakers by keeping yourself on mute. You can find your mute button in your lower screen on your corner of your screen. Just keep your mute button on until we get to that 7 p.m. mark, where we'll be asking the questions that you all put into the chat. And again, throughout the webinar, we'll be dropping links and resources in the chat box as well to engage with the questions and statements that you all will be asking throughout the webinar. So please keep your chat box open so you can see all the links and resources that we'll be dropping throughout the webinar at the same time. And like I already said, we'll be having a Q&A, but for those who do need any assistance, or we have accessibility when it comes down to closed captions, and I think that will start soon as the speakers start, the closed captions will start as well. So if you do need closed captions, please let us know so we can make sure that we have that available for you. So again, just to give a brief overall of a conversation today, and something that I am charging you all to do while you are listening to our speakers is to think, when it comes down to environmental justice, what does that really mean? Is it really about clean air? Is it really about clean water? Or is it about equality? Or is it about all of it? What are your thoughts about this? When it comes down to environmental justice, how does this affect our schools, our jobs, our health, our housing, and our quality of life? These are the things that I'm charging you to think about as we start our webinar, because we have some amazing speakers who are going to touch on all of these points and topics. With further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Maurice Sampson. You're on mute, Maurice.
Here we are. We're off to a rousing start. We can get to my first slide. Good evening, and I want to give you just a brief history of environmental justice. Next slide. The environmental justice movement has its roots in the civil rights movement. The seminal event occurred in rural Warren County, North Carolina in 1982, often cited as what began the environmental justice movement. If I can go to the next slide, I have a short video for you.
In a small, predominantly African-American community in eastern North Carolina called Warren County, African Americans and white activists joined together in protest in what's described as a merger of civil rights and environmentalism.
The whole environmental justice movement as a movement really took off in Warren County, because this was a case study where people basically drew a line in the dirt and said no more.
For nearly 4 years, the residents of Warren County have been protesting the state of North Carolina's plan to transport PCB-contaminated soil to a landfill in their community. When the trucks began to roll, angered residents decided they'd had enough, and in a nonviolent act of civil disobedience, they blocked the road.
Here you had primarily a lot of African-American women and their children who literally laid down in the streets to block the trucks from dumping polychlorinated biphenyls, PCB, in a toxic waste landfill in their community. And here's an agricultural community where the aquifer level is very shallow near the surface, where most people have wells, get their drinking water from wells. And the thought that the state would pick this county of all of the 100 counties in North Carolina as a dumping site was just unthinkable.
The Warren County incident triggered a whole series of investigations into the relationship between race and toxics. In 1983, the General Accounting Office examined the placement of off-site commercial hazardous waste landfills in 8 states in the Southeast. What they found was that 3 out of 4 were located in predominantly poor and African-American communities, in a region where African-Americans comprise only 20% of the population.
Now, that's disproportionate impact. That is not a random distribution. In other words, you're only 20% of the population, but 3 out of 4 of the landfills. And that's the first government study that actually documented this particular pattern.
In 1987, the United Church of Christ's Commission on Racial Justice issued its first report on toxic wastes and race in the U.S. The report's findings stirred up a big national debate about the relationship between where people live, the race of those communities, and the location of the toxic waste facilities.
And what the 1987 report did was it verified, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that in terms of the location of toxic waste facilities, those are commercial, licensed, and those uncontrolled sites, those that are not licensed, you find an overwhelming and disproportionate amount of these facilities in African-American communities, in Latino American communities, and other people of color communities.
The report concluded that 3 out of every 5 Hispanic and African Americans lived in areas with uncontrolled toxic waste sites. Reverend Ben Chavis, executive director of the commission at that time, coined this phenomenon, environmental racism.
Environmental racism is racial discrimination in environmental policymaking. It is the deliberate targeting of racial and ethnic communities for environmental facilities, hazard facilities like toxic waste landfills, incinerators. It is also the disproportionate presence of point generation sources of toxins like petrochemical facilities.
In 1992, the National Law Journal released the findings of its own investigation.
One of the things that became really clear to us in our data was that polluters in white communities get higher penalties for violating the law than polluters in minority communities. And that is not the case if you compare high-income and low-income areas. Their penalties are virtually the same.
The study also found that the government had taken longer to address hazards in Superfund sites located in minority communities and accepted less stringent cleanup plans.
I think once people find out what the real dangers of environmental injustice are, there are a lot of dangers, people will really get involved. Because we often say that the issue of environmental racism is an issue of life and death. It's just not an issue of some form of prejudice where somebody doesn't like you because of the color of your skin. This is an issue that will take your life away if you don't get involved.
Next slide. One more. There we go. So we have there the Warren County was where it began. He mentioned the Toxic and Race report in 1987. Out of that report then came the first People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit in 1991, to which I was the sole Pennsylvania delegate. And then there, 3 years later, in the office of the president, President Clinton signed the first executive order for environmental justice. Next slide. The roots in Pennsylvania started with the organizing of the community against the Westinghouse incinerator in Chester, followed by an environmental risk study by EPA in conjunction with the Department of Natural Resources in 1993. A marked event in Pennsylvania was the lawsuit filed by the Chester residents concerned for environmental quality in 1996, a suit that first coined in law the idea of cumulative impacts. Fortunately, the company went out of business in that lawsuit, although it got to the Supreme Court. It didn't progress any further. On from there, was because of that activity, the first Environmental Justice Working Group was formed in DEP, which led to a report in '99 and recommendation in 2001. If we go to the next slide. This led to a series of events that in 2021, Governor Wolf issued an executive order that permanently established the Office of Environmental Justice. And later in that same year, if you just go to the next slide, later in that same year, we saw the first introduction of the environmental justice legislation by Representative Donna Bullock, House Bill 652, and in the current session, where we are today, presented by Representative Greg Vitale, Bill 102. So if we go to the next slide. Now, efforts from the DEP's predecessors in the Office of Environmental Justice led to the development of a tool called PennEnviroscreen, a mapping tool that helps identify communities in the state that are disproportionately burdened by pollutions and other environmental hazards. Next slide. The model combines 32 environmental and health social indicators in order to, in the next slide, in order to create a score that identifies environmental justice areas. Any community, every community in the state is considered. Those communities that score above 80 become environmental justice areas. Now, if we go to the next slide, and we'll first click, there are 1,965 justice areas that have a score of greater than 80. Next click. 20%, 20%, 1 out of 5 of all Pennsylvanians live in environmental justice areas. Next click. Within the environmental justice areas, 40% of all of Philadelphia's Black and brown citizens live versus 12% of all of Pennsylvania's white citizens. Next click. One more. While Pennsylvania's Black and brown citizens are disproportionately represented, 53% of those people who live in environmental justice are white citizens. Next click. In Pennsylvania, environmental justice is not just a Black issue. It is everyone's issue, and even more urgent if you live in a diverse community. Next slide. Now, with this map, the darker the color, the greater the burden. And this gives us a tool, if we go to the next slide, to look at, in this case, you could put in your own address, you could put in your own community, or you can put in legislative districts. Here in the eastern part of the state, we have District 123. If you'll click, you have pesticides as an issue. Click again. Traffic. Click again. Landfill. Click again. And coal mines. Go to the next slide. Here in the western part of the state, in Piney Township, 63rd District, put a click, please. We have traffic. Next. Oil and gas wells. Next. Hazardous waste facilities. Next. Risk flood. Next. And coal mines. If we go to the next slide, we have an area that's familiar to all of us here who've been involved, and that's what's in Chester. Now let's look at what happens in Chester. If you do a click, please. We have chemical plants. Next. Airplanes. Next. Railroads. Next. Oil refineries. Next. A solid waste facility. Next. And traffic. And I think that's it. One more. How about a trash incinerator? Can't forget that. Okay, I think that ends my slides. If we go to the next slide. Thank you very much, and I'll pass this on to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Maurice. We appreciate you. The only thing you didn't do, Maurice, was introduce yourself. Can you take 30 seconds to properly introduce yourself one time?
And here I am telling you to introduce yourself. My name is Maurice Sampson. I am the Eastern Pennsylvania Director for Clean Water Action. Thank you
so
very
much. We appreciate you. Up next, we have EcoPhilly.
Hello, my name is Barbara Sheehan, and I'm a member of the EcoPhilly leadership team. Next slide. And I wanted to talk about why I work in advocating for environmental justice. Actually, I volunteer for advocating for environmental justice. And it all comes down to this document, which is Laudato Si, that was put out by Pope Francis in 2015. Although it came out in 2015, I wasn't really aware of it until 2020 during the pandemic, when there were worldwide Zoom conferences to discuss the call that he gave us to care for creation, address climate change, and recognize the effects on the most vulnerable communities. We started organizing around Laudato Si in our parish. We created a Care for Creation ministry, and then we joined EcoPhilly. So next slide, please. And thus we became part of the Laudato Si movement, which is a grassroots movement of Catholics and others who care about climate change. Next slide. So if you look at, this is a paragraph from the Laudato Si, which has 246 paragraphs. One of the things we did in the beginning was to read it together on Zoom, all paragraphs in our parish. But this gives you an idea of why we do what we do. He spoke about global inequality, that the deterioration of the environment and of society affects the most vulnerable people on the planet. We have to realize that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. It must integrate questions of justice in debates on the environment so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, which kind of became a rallying cry of the Laudato Si movement, especially for those of us who want to engage in advocacy. Next slide. So Further, he, in addition to the Laudato Si 2015 and 2023, he added to it because he had some impatience about the lack of enough involvement in working on climate change, and especially among Catholics around the world. And he expressed that it was really, really urgent. He said, to express this bluntly, this is no longer a secondary or ideological question, but a drama that harms us all. The African bishop stated that climate change makes manifest a tragic and striking example of structural sin. Next slide. And then further, in his May 13th letter, 2023, during the season of creation, he told us there's three things we really need to do. We need to transform our hearts, transform our lifestyles, and transform the public policies ruling our societies. So this was a call to get involved in public policy as advocates. Next slide. So the first thing that we did was we looked into the local bill that had to do with environmental justice, and that was last year, previously 652, this year, recently it's HB 109. And this just met all our concerns of caring for the earth, and caring for the poor. Because it had to do with cumulative impact in environmental justice areas. So that led to our involvement, next slide, with Clean Water Action. And Maurice, who invited us to come to Harrisburg and do some lobbying for HB 109, previously 652, which we did in 2024 and in 2025. Next slide. We also called our legislators and did letter writing campaign, including writing letter to the editor. Next slide. And during our annual summit, which Philadelphia area summit for EcoPhilly, we invited Chris Rabb, who is one of the co-sponsors of HB 109, to the summit in 2024, and Greg Vitale, the other co-sponsor, came and spoke with us in 2025. Next slide. So another thing that really got me enthused about it was finding out about this Penn environmental screen, which Maurice talked about. I just thought it was an amazing, sophisticated tool that anyone who's involved in environmental justice or environmental activism in Pennsylvania should take advantage of, because you could put in any address and find out what the score is in terms of environmental justice based on pollutants and vulnerable communities. Next slide. So further, it also broadened the definition of vulnerable communities with population characteristics that included health factors and socioeconomic factors, in addition to poverty and race. And I found that I'm in two of these categories. So I realized that this affects almost all of us. Next slide. And then further, Pope Leo, answered the call. Pope Francis passed away, and Pope Leo did not put this topic on the back burner. He sponsored a conference from his residence in Italy earlier this month called Raising Hope for Climate Justice. It's a 3-day conference, and his speech on the topic was excellent. He included in the opening session Arnold Schwarzenegger, who talked about how you can get active in the statewide level and still do a lot. And I want you to notice that big block of ice on the stage, that block was there for the whole 3 days. And so the participants watch it melt, which has obvious metaphor for what we're going through on the planet. Next slide. And then finally, Pope Leo didn't just say, yeah, Laudato Si was a great thing, but added to it, where in addition to what Pope Francis said about how we have to make political change, he said everyone in society, through non-governmental organizations and advocacy groups like ours, must put pressure on governments to develop and implement more rigorous regulations, procedures, and controls. Exactly what HB 109 is trying to do. So I will conclude with his conclusion and his speech, where he concluded with a question that he says concerns each of us. God will ask if we have cultivated and cared for the world that he created for the benefit of all and for future generations, and if we have taken care of our brothers and sisters. What will be our answer? Thank you for allowing me to participate, and I leave it to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Barbara. One more time for 30 seconds. Can you let people know who you are and how they can find more information?
Okay, so I'm a member of EcoPhilly, which is an organization of Catholic parishes, schools, universities, and orders. And I think I put the link for EcoPhilly in the very beginning. If not, I'll put it in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Barbara. Up
Okay.
next, we have Clean Air Council plus Marcus Hook's area neighborhoods.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm Alice Liu. I'm the policy analyst at Clean Air Council. Clean Air Council is a member-supported environmental organization. I'm located in Philly, and I'll pass it to my co-panelist, Tom.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Nixon. I'm a member of the Marcus Hook Area Neighbors for Public Health, and I'm from the city of Chester. And I'm one of the community investigators for the Access survey.
Okay, and hi, I'm Laura Snyder. I am on the leadership team with the Marcus Hook Area Neighbors for Public Health. I was a co-investigator along with Tom for the ASSESS study, which took us about 2.5 years working with Johns Hopkins University. Okay, and I'll give it back to Alice. Thanks.
Thanks. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the ASSESS study was a community-based participatory research study that Clean Air Council conducted in partnership with Marcus Hook Area Neighbors for Public Health, as well as Johns Hopkins University researchers and community co-investigators. And that community co-investigators piece is kind of what makes this CBPR approach so unique, because collaboration goes both ways between community members and the traditional researchers who you might imagine when you think the word researcher. And this approach also can produce relevant and actionable items because impacted community members are so involved in the research process. Going into the study, we had 3 main goals. We wanted to be able to describe how residents experience cumulative impacts in their communities, whether that be from chemical stressors or non-chemical, like social stressors. We wanted to collect data on community stressors and needs, as well as strengths. And we also wanted to provide data back to residents, community leaders, and policymakers to better advocate for cumulative impacts and environmental justice. Let's go on to the next slide. So this study involved a survey portion, as well as a series of focus groups and interviews. So for the surveys, we received nearly 150 survey respondents, and these respondents represented folks from Trainer, from Marcus Hook, City of Chester, as well as other communities in that region. And I will say, because Laura and Tom were community co-investigators on this, please direct any questions you have about this study to them, because they were very heavily involved in this process. I'll pass it along to Tom.
Next slide, please. Well, and this is a map of the geographical area that we looked at in terms of for our study. It goes up, starting with Eddystone and Tenneco, and it goes all the way down to Marcus Hook. So we're all along the Interstate 95 and also 291, the riverfront from Marcus Hook all the way almost up to the airport, and then along in the surrounding areas. You can see that the businesses that are saturated in our communities are very close together. The orange represents the incinerator, which is Covanto or ReWorld. The purple represents petrochemical facilities that are in our area. You can see that there are few of those there. And then the black represents other industries. We have a soccer stadium, we have other polluters or corporations in the area. But it's a small saturated area of these organizations or these corporations, but it's also represented by how close proximity they are to residential areas. So that's the map that you're looking at. And you can see that it's a small area, but it's saturated with a lot of petrochemicals and other industries. Next slide, please. So one of the things in Southern Delaware County is it's that it's home to a lot of multiple community industrial facilities, from trash and sewer incinerators to petrochemical plants to refineries and other factories. And one of the things that we really wanted to emphasize in the study is that a lot of these things do not have permitting agencies are not looking at the chemical impact of all these industries in such a small little space. So we want to make sure that the map, think about the map and think about how these communities, our communities in Southeast Pennsylvania, are overburdened by frontline environmental justice communities. Most of these communities that are along the riverfront are Black and brown and marginalized communities or poor, low economic communities. So we want to make sure that you can see that that's why they're all saturated in this part of our county. There's multiple burdens, not only looking at chemical stressors, but we also looked at other things that are non-chemical stressors that impact the community, mainly financial insecurity, food insecurity, violence, and also crime. All these stresses, along with the chemical stresses, can have a negative impact on the community, particularly when you think about harmful cumulative burdens that have been studied or have never been really studied or haven't really been told about how their impacts those particular areas, particularly areas that are saturated with these types of industries and other community stressors. Next slide, please.
Okay, thanks, Tom. I'm going to talk next about the 4 key findings of the assessed study. First one, residents of Southern Delaware County are overburdened by chemical and non-chemical stressors. These cumulative burdens harm physical, mental, and environmental health. And those were the 3 components that we looked at in the assessed study. Not just physical, not just diagnosis, but we looked at mental health and environmental health. Symptoms of physical and mental health problems are more widespread in the community than what has been diagnosed or previously documented. Residents are making a very clear connection between their health, pollution, odors, and noise in the environment. Children in Southern Delaware County are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of pollution, as well as the cumulative impacts of non-chemical stressors, which examples are economic insecurity, lack of affordable housing, food insecurity, violence, and crime. Many more children in Southern Delaware County experience symptoms, asthma symptoms of coughing, wheezing, than have the medical diagnosis of this. Big takeaway for me from this survey was 95% of participants reported noxious odors that interfered with their daily, everyday activities. Next slide, please. Okay, next we have a word cloud collage that we developed regarding the predominant larger size words are the ones that the participants reported how they described the odors. So sulfur, rotten eggs, chemical smell, sewage, gas smell, trash. And again, 95% reported smelling odors that interfered in their everyday daily activities. A higher percentage of Black participants noticed odors more regularly than white, 97 versus 78%. 100% of the participants in the city of Chester reported odors regularly, 85% in Trainer, 82% in Marcus Hook. Around half of the survey participants reported disruption of daytime activities, 53%, disruption of sleep, 48%, and physical harm, 56% of noise in their communities. Next slide. Okay, and this is a Venn diagram which illustrates the overlap of these cumulative impacts. So again, the study looked at mental, physical, and environmental health, which all combined is the cumulative impacts. So participants who face more challenges in their lives tended to have poorer health. Participants acknowledged the compounding burden of environmental, physical, and mental challenges. Residents want policymakers to prioritize factors that are harming their health. The overlap you can see in the middle, the largest percentage, pollution and chemical exposure, violence and crime, and food insecurity were the main overlapping factors. We also have the meager minimum wage increase, housing instability, limited financial resources, and poor neighborhood conditions are all the non-chemical stressors that were looked at in this study. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to pass this back to Tom.
Okay. So key findings from our community strengths and assets is that the community had a strong sense of belonging. They felt that they felt supported by their neighbors. They wanted to make sure that they knew that everyone knows they have a strong sense of community. One of the things in terms of just a quote that we have from the community is that good people are born and raised here. So I'm proud of the community in which I come from and the people who really love and care about you and your neighborhoods. And one of the things that the people stay in the community because they love the area. They built their family are there, they built roots there, and they feel that this is the community that they want to live in. And so that's one of the things in terms of just a community strength and asset from the survey that we found that there's a strong sense of connection and belongingness in the community. Next slide.
So I think we can safely say we don't want the study to end, the conclusion of the study. We want the study to be useful. We want it to be a tool for advocacy in the movement to get environmental and health impacts considered in a holistic way, right? We can't just look at facilities on their own. We can't look at social stressors on their own. Everything is compounding, everything is cumulative. So we encourage you, if this moved you, if this spoke to you, to join our campaign in support of cumulative impacts legislation in Pennsylvania. And we look forward to connecting in the Q&A portion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. Alice, is there any way that you can maybe squeeze it in for everyone, how people can stay connected with you all?
Yes, I could drop a link, an email in the chat for myself, and I'll drop a link to our website, as well as the Marcus Hook Area Neighbors for Public Health Facebook page for folks to get connected and added to any email lists.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And before we go to our next speaker, again, I'm encouraging everyone to drop your comments, questions, thoughts. As our speakers are actually doing their presentations, please engage as much as possible because, again, at the 7 p.m. time frame, we're going to go into our Q&A portion, and we want to make sure that you all are a part of the conversation. And actually, we are answering the questions or concerns that you may have this evening. So please drop your questions, drop your concerns, drop your statements even in our chat today. We're going to move on. And we're going to go directly to Chester resident concern for quality of living, aka Circle.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. All right. Let's get into it. I'm Zuline Mayfield. I'm the chairperson of Chester Residents Concern for Quality Living, better known, or we like to be called Circle. We formed in 1992 as a direct result of what came into our community being billed as a trash to steam facility in 1991. We learned in actuality it was nothing more than an incinerator. After that, we formed based on everything that you could see, hear, and smell. We had no idea that the pollution landed literally on top of us. Chester is the oldest city in Pennsylvania. William Penn landed in Chester, not in Philadelphia, in 1681. Chester was once an economic hub and the center of manufacturing, shipbuilding, and heavy industry. Chester built the wealth of Delaware County. Chester suffered, like most industrial cities, with industry closing or moving to the suburbs, resulting in a loss of residents and our economic stability. We are just 15 miles outside of Philly, 5 miles from both New Jersey and Delaware. 35,000 people reside within Chester's 5 miles, so it makes us a very densely populated community. Much of Chester, some 3.9 miles, is waterfront and sits on the Delaware River. In Chester, 70% of our residents are African American, and the median income is roughly about $39,000. In 1995, Dr. Charles Lee, at the time with the United Church of Christ, labeled Chester as one of the worst cases of environmental racism that he had ever seen. In 1992, the incinerator managed by Westinghouse at the time was the fourth largest incinerator in the country. Today, it is owned by Covanta Reworld, and it is the largest incinerator in the nation, burning 3,500 tons of trash per day. They operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they mass burn about 1.3 million tons of garbage a year. Philadelphia contributes about 30% of the trash being burned, or a little over 400,000 tons of trash per year. Additionally, New York sends roughly about maybe 420 tons of trash to our city to be burned, and Chester contributes about 1.8% of the garbage that is sent. The New York trash is sent down by rail, then it is to Delaware, then it's loaded on trucks and trucked into our community, resulting in anywhere from 500 to 800 trucks per day. The Covanta Reworld incinerator leads as the #1 polluter in Delaware County in nitrous oxides, carbon monoxide, mercury, #2 in releases of lead, fine particulate matter 2.5, sulfur dioxide, cadmium, chromium, and arsenic, which are all well-known carcinogens. VOC compounds are all contributors to climate destruction. But we know the human destruction. Over 27% of our children have asthma. We have high incidences of infant mortality and low birth weight baby. The cancer rates are higher than the national average. Liver and bile cancer is 91% higher than the national average. Laryngeal, 84% higher. Hodgkin's lymphoma, 78% higher. Pancreatic cancer, 50% higher. All higher than the national average. Recently, Circle lost a member, Joshua Shockley. He was 38 years old from a rare form of cancer. The first day of his chemo treatment was the day that his son was born. His son was 5 months old, and he died. He's gone forever. Covanta Reworld is an outdated facility in terms of its pollution control technology. It was built over 33 years ago. It lacks modern pollution control technology. They say that they operate within its permit limits. We say they are grandfathered in and would not be able to meet today's clean air standards. Delaware and Philadelphia counties we are in what is called a non-attainment area, meaning that our air quality is consistently unhealthy to breathe. In 2024, the American Lung Association issued its State of the Air report and gave Delco a failing grade for annual particulate pollution. Environmental exposures, particulate matter 2.5, toxic air emissions, and diesel particulate matter. Chester also falls within the 90 percentile for ozone, meaning it is in the top 10% in the state for ground level ozone exposure, which are known to cause respiratory distress among other health problems. Additionally, the Covanta Reworld incinerator on the waterfront Chester has become a real hindrance to the true economic development of our waterfront and for our city. They have caused a devaluation of properties and lowered the social quality of life in the community. People no longer sit on their porches, have barbecues, or are embarrassed to have company over due to the stench emanating from the incinerator. The houses surrounding the incinerator went from an 81% owner-occupied housing rate to now it is under 40%. The community has been transformed into a majority rental units. Many homeowners basically walked away from their properties that you could not sell or rent. I was one of them, and that house still sits empty. Circle was able to convince Delaware County Solid Waste Authority to do a life cycle analysis of its trash. It's sent to be burned. Some of the findings concluded that incineration in the city of Chester has caused $193 million more in human health and environmental costs per ton of waste disposed than that of directly landfilling. Well, looking at the human health costs alone, incineration was 23 times worse than landfilling. We have been able to convince the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority, which determines where the waste goes at in Delaware County, to come up with a diversionary plan to divert the waste away from incineration. They are moving towards that goal. However, they're moving slow. So, but we're going to continuously advocate for that. Currently in the city of Philadelphia, Councilwoman Gaultier issued or penned a resolution that says Stop Trashing Our Air Act. It is now sitting in committee, and we need support from Philadelphians to push that resolution through. So what more do? We can advocate for mandatory recycling and community-wide composting, removing organics from the stream, have your community conduct a life cycle analysis of waste, incineration versus landfilling. It will determine that landfilling is cheaper and less polluting than incineration. Divert your trash from incineration. Stop sending trash to Chester.
Thank you so much, Ms. Zuline. We appreciate you. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. I actually put some questions in there to get some people, going and thinking now that we have access to everyone in the chat. So again, thank you all for coming through this evening. Again, this is your time to speak up, ask your questions, reach out to our speakers today. This is when you're getting right at them. They're here today for you. Everything we do is a FUBU effect. It's for you and about you. But Ms. Zuline, can you squeeze in about 30 seconds how people can find more information about Circle?
They can go to www.chesterpaej.org.
Awesome.
Follow us on Instagram at Chester_EJ.
Thank you so much. Up next, we have Center for Coalfield Justice.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here tonight. My name is Nina Victoria, and I'm a community advocate with the Center for Coalfield Justice. CCJ works in Washington and Greene counties in the very southwest corner of Pennsylvania. We're home to the largest underground coal mining operation and also the nation's highest concentration of fracking wells. Our mission is to improve policy and regulations for the oversight of fossil fuel extraction and use, to educate, empower, and organize coalfield residents, and to protect public and environmental health. I'll be talking a little bit about how HB 109 will help communities like mine and other communities on this call. So the communities we work in have been dealing with extractive industries and pollutions for over a century, from coal mining and steelmaking to natural gas to plastics, hydrogen production, and now data centers. Extractive industries are deeply embedded in the culture and politics of the region, and oftentimes residents are dealing with the pollution from many industries at the same time, leading to compounding and significant health and environmental impacts like many others on the call have talked about already. However, in the permitting process, all of the pollution from all of the industries in an area isn't taken into account. Only the pollution from the specific project at hand is considered. This lack of consideration has led to worsening impacts from several industries, which is known as cumulative impacts. And while our leaders seemingly want unlimited development in the name of economic growth, these industries are hurting the people who live nearby. Residents and workers get sick from the pollution. We have members fighting asthma and other respiratory issues, worse birth outcomes, skin rashes, black lung disease, heart disease, cancer, and unfortunately, some who have died. And on top of illness, these residents are dealing with property damage, lower property values, the lack of job opportunities, and increasing housing costs, which in many cases are issues that are related to the industries situated in their communities. However, even with the existing build out in our service area, we see proposals for more projects on a daily basis because of our strategic location. And even though these industries cause real harm, there is nothing stopping more industry from moving in as long as they meet the standards and applicable permits. So the Department of Environmental Protection, or DEP, currently has an environmental justice policy that is supposed to help communities like the ones we work in. It provides for more notice to the community, requires community meetings and input, and prioritizes inspection and enforcement in environmental justice communities. However, it is also discretionary to follow, so sometimes it isn't used, and other times when the policy is used, it gets executed poorly. For example, in one of the communities, well, a couple of the communities we work in, Bolger and Smith, both of which are identified as being in the 99th percentile on Penn EnviroScreen as some of the most environmentally burdened communities in the state. There are two large natural gas plants currently undergoing major expansions. Yet, despite the clear environmental justice implications, DEP failed to ensure meeting public participation. Instead, they held a instead of holding a separate public informational meeting to explain the projects and their potential impacts in plain language, DEP combined that meeting with the formal public hearing. This approach effectively deprived community members of the opportunity to fully understand the proposed developments, make informed opinions, and prepare substantive comments. As a result, the DEP received fewer, less detailed, and less impactful public comments, silencing critical local perspectives. The residents of these communities are the true experts on their lived experience and bear the greatest risk from industrial expansion. Their voices should guide decisions about projects directly affecting their health, safety, and quality of life. However, the current process undermines that principle, leaving environmental justice communities without genuine influence, despite the existence of an environmental justice policy that promises otherwise. Additionally, no matter how dangerous the infrastructure is nearby or how many comments in opposition are submitted, the DEP will approve a project application if the permit conditions have been met. This is because they do not have any discretion to deny permits, and the department is required to approve them as long as they are not deficient in their application and their project won't exceed emission or other permit standards. Importantly, even though developers probably know their plans for years before acting on them, they piecemeal their applications to DEP. They will permit one part of a facility, then years later expand and submit another permit, and they do this continuously until they have reached their final size. The developers can do this because they know that their permits will likely be approved every time they apply, so there is no need to get the entire project permitted at one time. This is harmful to communities like Boulder because large projects that likely need large permits, such as a Title V air permit, are less scrutinized because they are applying for smaller permits while the bigger picture isn't taken into account. HB 109 would take significant steps to rectify many of the issues we experience in environmental justice communities. It would codify the environmental justice policy that already exists and would require its use, ensuring community member voices are heard. It would require DEP to take community comments into consideration before issuing a permit. However, while public input is necessary and essential, without the authority to deny a permit in an overburdened community that doesn't support the project, public input doesn't have much effect. HB 109 corrects this and also gives DEP the authority to deny permits based on the cumulative impacts in an area. This is a key piece that will really create change in environmental justice communities and give the power to the people to prevent a development that will further harm their health and safety, which is why we need HB 109 to pass. Thanks again for having me. My name is Nina, and again, I work for the Center for Coalfield Justice, and you can find us at the centerforcoalfieldjustice.org.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Nina. We appreciate you. And you actually have Carr from Southwest PA in the building as well. So you're not here by yourself. And I thank everyone for joining who just came in. And thank you, David and Patricia, for jumping in the chat. We appreciate that statement. Hopefully we can get to that in the 7 p.m. hour when we get to our Q&A. We appreciate everyone. Thank you, Marlene, coming from Southwest Philadelphia. We have one more speaker before we get into our Q&A community conversation today. Again, thank you so much. Please feel free to continue to engage in the chat this evening. But last but not least, we have Conservation Voters of PA.
Hello, I am Katie Bloom. I am the Political and Legislative Director for CVPA. And for those of you who don't know, CVPA is the kind of people-powered political voice for environmental policies. That's a lot of P's. And we do a lot of work around what we call a cycle of accountability, where we educate, evaluate, endorse, and elect, and keep that going to try to push those policies. You can find us at conservationpa.org. I know they'll put that link in the chat. But what I want to say is, what is going on with HB 109? You heard it mentioned earlier. You just heard Nina mention it as well, and all of the work that we have tried to do. I want to give you a little bit of background first beyond HB 109 and say a little bit more on the energy front, and this is a little less on water. CVPA did a poll earlier this year, and it was a little bit more focused on things like oil and gas pollution. But what we found was that 64% of the Pennsylvania electorate, of voters in Pennsylvania, agreed that we need more regulations to protect our air, water, and climate from oil and gas pollution, which is a lot of the bulk of the pollution we face in Pennsylvania, not the only. And what that meant was swing voters, the voters that our elected officials care so much about in the work that they do so they can get reelected again. There was a 43% increase in support among those swing voters for more regulations to protect our air and water and climate from pollution. Again, specifically, this was with an oil and gas messaging. But I think that's really important for the context that we're looking at when we are talking about our legislature. Right now, actually kind of going to answer a question that came up because I was already going to talk about it. Right now, we are dealing with a budget stalemate. Nothing's happening. We're not passing anything right now that is at all full of substance to help communities right now because of the stalemate that we are facing. But the HB 109 legislation still faces an uphill battle as we go forward. Our legislators, even our friends, have a hard time connecting how critical HB 109 is for job creation, to clean up polluted sites, as we maybe they're denied further expansion permits, to invest in clean energy and renewable things. Those are job creators that can be investments for our air and water, improved stormwater, improved sewer systems and water systems, just to begin with, because there are so many things that make an environmental justice community based on the map that all of you saw earlier. And there is a critical importance across the state, as you heard Maurice talk about. There are a lot of communities that are impacted by pollution. And some of what we face, aside from legislators not necessarily being able to connect all of these dots with the healthy air and water, they think a lot about economic impacts, right? They think about, how do we show them that, cleaning up communities or attracting a different kind of business, preferably, could also help our economy. That's a lot of the conversations that legislators are having, but also on affordability, which is lifting up some of the stuff that we just heard from Clean Air Council on health, looking at health costs. Our costs are going up across the board, not just our electric bills, but also our healthcare costs. They're going to potentially go up more, even if we don't get a state budget soon. As we know from the feds, Medicaid is going to be in trouble really soon. And the state also helps with the distribution of those payments. And there are people who live in polluted communities who need that. One of the big things that we all need to do, everyone on this call, your friends, tell your family, is reach out to our legislators. And I know our folks who are helping us with the webinar tonight are going to be dropping in some links. Thank you, Natalie. But we really need those contacts. Emails and phone calls. If Clean Water Action or anyone else is having a lobby day in Harrisburg, sign up for it. We need to make these voices heard directly to elected officials, point those elected officials to that environmental justice map, because the majority, all of our legislative districts have environmental justice communities in their districts. And we are dealing the folks I'd love for you to contact the most, whether it is budget stalemate holding things up, God forbid it goes on long enough that existing people who look at permits have to get furloughed. But we really, really need folks to call their senators. Especially folks who are in Senate districts that are not overwhelmingly Democratic. The Republican leadership in the Senate, they are in charge of the Senate. They have been holding these up, but they're also demanding certain caveats for bills that pass out of the House. So that is one area of advocacy. And the second area of advocacy is call your House members to and tell them this is important to you and why it's important to your community. Because until our legislators can truly understand some of those personal stories, and I don't just mean one legislator who's driving a piece of legislation, but all of them and how this impacts the entire state, this legislation is not going to move forward. So call your local reps and also call some senators. And that is how we can move forward. And it's going to take some time. It might take another election cycle. We might have to reintroduce this again. But we are making our way forward, and we really need all of you to share your stories.
Thank you so much. Please squeeze in a little 30 seconds of how people can find more information.
Yep, conservationpa.org is our website. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our presenters. That actually concludes our presenters for the evening. We appreciate you all for sharing your expertise, sharing your work. Thank you for the work, first and foremost, that you all are doing. It is very valuable, and everyone here on this call, I'm sure, appreciates it. That's why we showed up this evening. So we're going to get into our Q&A. This is the fun part, people. This is when we are answering the questions that you are asking directly. So I'm going to start with the first question that says, do we know, and I'm guessing that these questions are open to everyone on the panel or who did a presentation today. And if you are in the chat as well, you can also engage by responding to the questions in the chat as well. So the question says, do we know if any of the people who work at all of the polluting industries in ASSESS study actually also live in the same area? And this could be something for Alice, Tom, or Laura.
I can kick us off with the response to this, but Laura and Tom, please feel free to jump in whenever. I don't have a definitive answer as to whether survey respondents included in the ASSESS study actually work in these polluting industries. If I had to take a guess, I would say possibly, right? Like if you are living in a community or working somewhere, you're probably likely to be living there. But I think the main issue here is too, with these polluting facilities, they're owned by large corporations. And I could probably say fairly confidently that, you know, the heads and executives of these large corporations are not living in the impacted areas.
Okay, I'll answer a portion of that. I can tell you as far as the incinerator in Chester, I believe it's 120 something employees now. They claim they have 13 that live in Chester or in the Chester area. That could be a 5 mile radius. I can speak on Monroe. I think that it being a community-based industry, it's not what Sun was. Sun employed a lot of the local residents. I think that when the switch was made to Monroe, they did keep some, but I could primarily say when you go down there and see the cars come out of Monroe, they're New Jersey, they're Delaware, they're always leaving out of the community. In fact, they changed the whole traffic pattern down there so that they could get in and out. Brascom, I don't believe that these companies are employing the local residents, because if they were, the unemployment rates in those areas would not be as high as they are. So that's my spiel on it.
I mean, the feedback that we got from the surveys, because we did two types of, I mean, in terms of just the research group, there was the survey, but also we had small groups, and very few people mentioned that they worked for any of the polluters in the area. That was not even a topic of conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know we had one person in the focus group who did work for the industry, but otherwise, it was just residents. Yes, and I agree with what Zalim was saying, that, and we see this with, when pipelines were built, like the Mariner East and all that, it's all out-of-state workers. The only people that seem to be local who have jobs were like flaggers in the road. So, all of this industry bringing jobs to the local community, nope, doesn't happen.
Thank you. Thank you for answering. Thank you for your transparent answers. For the sake of conversation and time, we're going to move on. And this is a conversation that's open again to the floor. And I really thank you, Reg, for asking this question, because I think this is a great question. Has the Environmental Justice Right Amendment to the PA Constitution been utilized in any lawsuits related to the environmental justice hazards or threats to human health across the state?
When we brought the lawsuit against the DEP, that was a considered point. However, legally, we were advised by the attorneys that it wasn't a good strong point. It just wasn't, even though we're supposed to be guaranteed the right to live in a clean, safe environment constitutionally. I'm waiting for somebody to bring that lawsuit. We'll certainly join it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Maurice.
Just to second that.
Act like you don't know me.
From Zulene, that's true. And we have seen more and more environmental cases based on that amendment going through our state appellate court system to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And there have been some really good cases where the Supreme Court has upheld the Environmental Rights Amendment. And I think we're getting close to that time in terms of setting precedent, where, we can start addressing those things that Zulene's lawyers advised her not to. So I think we are starting to get enough legal precedents now to potentially start moving forward with some of those arguments as we've made the cases stronger and stronger.
Maurice, did you want to touch on that at any point before we move on? Okay. All right. So I'm going to get to the next question, and I appreciate you, David and Patrice or Patricia. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. The question is a great question, and this is something we talk about on EcoWord all the time because it's really a bit concerning right now in our state of Pennsylvania. How will the desire to build out AI centers, I'm sorry, he's still typing the question, like the one in Plymouth Township, I'm sorry, potentially, okay, I'm going to wait till he finishes the question. I'm sorry. All right, thank you. All right, so he has the question up. How will the desire to build out AI data centers like the one in Plymouth Township potentially impact environmental justice community? Is HB 502 a potential solution along with HB 109? And this is open to the floor as well.
You know, POC, I think that you and I first talked about this when we looked at the facilities that were built in Nashville.
Yep.
In fact, it was you that brought that to my attention, quite frankly. And quite frankly, it scares me. I mean, in Nashville, they built those facilities without talking to anybody, without any permits.
It's in Memphis. It's in
I'm
Memphis.
sorry, Memphis, in
Yeah.
Memphis. But they built that facility without talking to anybody, without any kind of permits. And when they turned it on, people could not breathe. They put together a series of natural gas powered facilities, small ones, in series, in order to produce all the power they need. They built it quickly. This was a Elon Musk operation. And I fear what that could be to happen here. When I look at Plymouth and talking about taking water to the Delaware, the amount of water that these need makes me wonder what happens when we have droughts. And we already have the salt water line coming up the Delaware River. You know, what is that going to mean? And if one municipality does it, you're going to see those being built up and down the coast. I think that,
And I'm afraid, Maurice, because there are a lot of warehouses that are, I mean, huge, huge warehouses that are being cropped up with no explanation as to what they are for.
right.
And, everybody, is being affected by that. They are already boosting our electrical rates and gas rates in anticipation of these AI centers, and our water rates are going to go up. And those are all quality of life things. If you can't afford to heat yourself or feed yourself or drink, and they are just sucking the energy up out of everything, and nobody can tell you what the end use is for these things.
Yeah.
So it's scary.
Need to pay attention to this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right now, I believe it's a money grab. They're throwing tons, all of the money they were going to throw at hydrogen. I think they've diverted over to AI centers. And you're talking about billions of dollars.
Without
Eddie?
without hydrogen, where's the fracked gas market? And there's a way there for our polluters to do it. I do want to lift up, there are a slew of good and bad pieces of data center legislation right now. There's some really good ones in the House. Co-sponsor memos have been put out kind of as a package to address a lot of different issues that Maurice and Zulene just described, whether it's water consumption, things like that. So I want to lift that up. But where HB 109 comes into play is if that also gets enacted, that layers in on top of the protections that some of the members of the House are trying to do with data centers right now. And it's just an additional layer of protection from some of that legislation to add HB 109 to that to even further protect communities.
Yeah, but we also have to defeat 520. Okay?
That's
They
what I was
have a
about to
bill
say.
out now, House Bill 520, that would snatch away local zoning rights. You would have a panel, of course, picked by the industry that will greenlight everything. And our local municipalities will have no recourse. They won't have a dog in that fight. You'll have a seven member or 17, whoever they are, panel decide what's going to go in your local area.
Thank
So
you.
that thing has to be defeated.
Yeah.
I want to read some comments really quickly before we get into our next question, and maybe this can actually help expand on some of the topics that you all just spoke on. Shout out to Susan. Susan said, speaking of PA Supreme Court, please vote to retain the court justice, as the court may move to the right if conservatives are elected. Next, we go on. Shout out to David and Patricia. Again, they're really engaging tonight. We appreciate that. And said HB 502, not 520. I'm not. That, I guess that was a help right there. We appreciate that. And then Chris said HB 109 is essentially and is essential. I'm sorry, and HB 502 needs to go away. Any thoughts on that?
Well, thank you, David, for auto-correcting me. He does it all the time. Thank you.
Yeah, I can just speak to that. a little bit too. It is the HB 502, and just like Celine was saying, that would take all local control away. So who knows our zoning best, and who knows our comprehensive plans are our elected officials and the residents in the area. And to take that power away from local people and to give it to the state seems very unconstitutional to me. So we need to defeat HB 502.
Yes, and Susan went on to say a new natural gas plant and data center is being built in Indiana County. People here are very concerned about the air quality in the watersheds. There doesn't seem to be any way to stop it or to demand frontline monitoring or to compel developers to aside the community benefit agreement. Any thoughts on that when it comes down to community benefit agreements?
Listen, all of the lies are the same. They all consistently community benefits agreement always is in skew to the developer or the polluter. You know, people think that they're making good deals. Okay, well, I'm going to allow you to pollute me because I'm going to get a community benefit. It's the forever telling, banana in the tailpipe. When are we got to get over being prostituted for pollution? These things are dangerous. They are, Maurice and POC told you where to look to for history of what they are doing in that community. Those people are suffering. They are suffering. And if you don't think it's going to happen to you, you think you're so special, it's not going to happen, it will. So we all got to come together on this.
That's why we're here, Ms. Zuline. And that's why we're here tonight, Ms. Zuline. I want to jump Barbara or Nina into the conversation when it comes down to community benefit agreements. Nina, I seen you took yourself off mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in respect to all of this, we are heavily working on data centers here in Southwest Pennsylvania. Just in the last 2 days, we've heard of 3 more being announced being powered by natural gas and diesel generators. So it's going to be a big problem for us on here for all of the reasons people have mentioned earlier. But I also wanted to raise a little interesting point is that the developers of these data centers are signing non-disclosure agreements up to 2 years in advance of the projects coming online so that we don't have any information about what's going on until it's too late almost, which is why we're having these problems about being able to stop them. We have worked on community benefits, but like Zuline was saying, it is really a choice between the community of what they want to do. And oftentimes these are benefiting developers. So if you do want to work on a community benefits agreement, you have to make sure that the right people are at the table. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to get what you want.
Barbara, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I was kind of new to this idea of community benefits agreements, but I did attend a meeting with labor representatives at St. Joe's Prep. And I brought up that I had just been to the hearing that Vitali did in Chester and, learning about, and I thought that they might be there, that the hearing on HB 109, but they weren't. But they said, oh, well, that you have to have community benefit agreement. And I just kind of feel like it's a warning sign when they mention that instead of a bill that regulates. And, it's just kind of confirmed that I'm more in support of a bill that regulates than trying to deal with this community benefit agreement. That's limited information I have, but it's kind of my instinct.
Thank you. We're going to move on for the sake of time. We got about 10 minutes left, and I want to get back to our questions. Thank you guys for the comments in the chat. And the next question I want to move to says, have other states attempted to use policies to approach environmental justice racism? I'm sorry, let me start that over. Have other states attempted to use policy to approach and address environmental racism, and what can we learn from those efforts?
The first legislation that was passed in New Jersey by our Clean Water chapter there. Our bill was started with that as a model. I want you to know that it took them 10 years to pass that legislation, and it was passed out after the death of George Floyd. So it had that, it was something in place for them to respond to. We are not going to see this bill being passed soon here, but this bill, just like tonight, is an organizing tool where we need to understand what is going on everywhere. These data centers, for instance, whether you're in Indiana County or you're on the Schuylkill River here, we need to have one combined voice that talks to all of these things. And that is in part what this whole event is about, is it's about to start to put our voices together. We have leadership from people like Zulene. Zulene has kicked so many people out of Chester that they're trying to figure out where they can go, you know. And so we need to take the understanding that yeah, it's hard. It's going to take a lot of work, but it can be done, and it has been done. So, you know, yes. In fact, I don't know if Steve is here. There are other states that have passed cumulative impact legislation, but I know that it happened in New Jersey, and they actually stopped the Amazon Center from operating in the Port Authority. I still want to understand how they did that, because if I had thought that Amazon Center would be anywhere, it would be in the Port Authority of New York. But they defeated that, and using this bill was a bill like the one we have introduced is what they used to do that.
You know, and the New Jersey bill is the strongest EJ bill in the country. It's not perfect, but it is a start. Um, but I think that the key to everything now in this climate, federally and statewide, we are in a hell of a climate, okay? Where we have no other choice but to depend and lean on each other and lock arms, because we are definitely under attack. Definitely. Um, and if they see solidarity, um, Center for Coalfield Justice, I'm there with y'all, okay? I just got off a call earlier with Manhattan and Queens Solid Waste Advisory to gear up a battle for the New York trash. Okay. So bedfellows, you know, we're not all in our own little individual silos. We're all fighting for the same thing. No matter what the differences are, we have to lock arms and we have to put up a wall of force. And it could be the color purple if y'all want it. But we are in a tumultuous time. I've never seen a country such as the one I'm living in now.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much, Ms. Ulene, again for the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for being transparent this evening, and speaking from passion and love. And this next question goes back to Alice, Laura, or Tom. When it comes down, can you give examples of how the assessed data could be used for action towards justice?
I can speak a little about that. That is our campaign now that we're working with to get this HB 109 passed. And we have exciting news that the Senate just offered a companion bill as well. So I feel like we're making momentum. And you know, we talked about how we didn't want to make this just another survey. And you know, I know Zaliam will talk about how Chester's been studied over and over again. We really wanted some outcome from this. So this is why, you know, we have this statewide campaign now to work on this.
Yeah, and also, I mean, some of the things that come out of the study in terms of the feedback that we receive from the residents, in terms of the impact of noise on their mental health, on health disparities. We have Dr. Lauren, who's working on cancer, the impact of cancer and other health disparities on the area because there's so many stressors out there. So we can fight for, you know, equal, you know, in terms of healthcare. We don't have a hospital anymore. These are even more ammunition in terms of why we need to come together, as Lene said, in terms of fighting for our communities, because nobody's going to come save us but us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just moving right along because we got 5 minutes left and I want to make sure we get as much community conversation in as possible. Nina, this goes back to a statement that you made. It says, thank you, Kim, for your question. It says, Nina referred to natural gas and diesel powered data centers being built. Is there any point in trying to push for green data centers as pollution control measures? In case we see you as well.
Yes. So right now there is a bill in the House. These are going to change, right? Like they just got introduced and the legislative process gets messy. But right now there is one bill that is hoping to require at least 25% renewable energy for data centers. One of the problems with data centers right now, and I do want to differentiate between an AI data center and a regular data center. Both are coming. AI has like a lot of other power, but we're on a Zoom, we use our phone. There's still going to be data centers. So requiring renewables there and coming up with ways to make those centers energy efficient as well. There's a great co-sponsor memo out about that, to do whatever we can to minimize dirty energy usage with data centers. AI data centers, a little bit of a different thing, technically, but this would cover anything under the data center thing, because our prices are going up. We have a grid operator that doesn't know how to regulate this stuff. So there is legislation. It's not perfect. The legislative process is going to get messy, but we're going to keep working on it, and we're really hopeful.
Nina, quickly, did you want to say anything?
I think that pretty much covers it. Thanks.
Okay. And we're going to go in. Ms. Elaine, do you want to say anything quickly?
Yeah, but I think that one of the ways that we have to counter the greenwashing and the falsehoods. People automatically see these huge things and oh my God, we're going to have a ton of jobs. They don't produce a lot of jobs, and they do the opposite. They're going to put people out of work. So we have to talk about the economics of it all the way around, because people understand things in the first person. Oh my God, this is the reason why my electric bill is going up sky high. They're doing it now in anticipation of the strain that it's going to put on the grid and the unavailability of energy and water.
We're going to go
So
to our
they're
last.
making us pay for it now.
We're going to go to our last question, but before we do, Katie, does the data center bill have a number? And if so, what is it?
Yep. If I'm correct, it's been a long day. 1834. It's originally from Representative Matsy. It is currently in the House Energy Committee, and there was a 3-hour hearing today on it, which is why I'm in Harrisburg today. So, by the way, that bill also is considering, in terms of a community benefit kind of thing, is how do we also get these outrageously wealthy, trillion-dollar companies to also contribute to things like LIHEAP and other things like that that help people on the ground as well. So we're trying to get as much as we can out of this.
Okay, and we're going to actually wrap up. And as we're going to wrap up, I'm actually going to do a round table with each of our presenters today, just to get some more, insight on who you all are. And my one question that I just wanted to ask each of you is, when it comes down to environmental justice, simply what does that mean for you? Like at this time right now, what does that mean for you? And Alice, I want to start with you.
Sure. I guess it means, a situation where of reality where everyone has access to clean air, clean water, healthy living environments to not only live in, but to thrive, work, play, and just, exist in, right? Like this should not be a question of whether or not people have access to clean air. And I think it also involves doing the reparative work needed to address longstanding histories of disinvestment, of targeted pollution, right? Like this has to be there's a lot of work that needs to go into this, but I think it's something that we can get to.
Thank you. Laura, next.
Yeah, I would just say community, that, air, it doesn't stop at a certain border. Everybody's affected. Environmental justice, outside environmental justice areas, everybody needs to be conscious of environmental justice area, what's going on, because we all breathe the same air. We all, have the same water. So it's everybody's problem, and everybody has to wake up and work together and have a sense of community.
Thank you. Maurice?
To put it in real simple terms, HB 109 is the Save the People bill. We've had Save the Whales, we've had Save the Trees. This one is about Save the People. And that's what it's about. And I want to encourage everyone, go on EnviroScreen, put in your address, find out what the environment is like where you live in your neighborhood. And I see that we just had a posting from someone from the Office of Environmental Justice there. You want to check that out. That is a tool to be used for everyone, no matter what your issue is. Check it out.
Thank you. Nina?
I am thinking that my meaning of environmental justice right now is making sure that no communities are overburdened by pollution or by any pollution. And also we're correcting the wrongs of the past and building for a future that the community wants, no matter what it is. And that future can be different for every community.
Love that. Tom?
People over profits. I mean, that's one of the things that I want to emphasize. These people are in business and they're risking our lives to make profit. And our communities mean more to us than that. And we're more than just a percentage or a hyphen on a piece of paper.
Thank you, Tom. Katie?
Tom actually took the words right out of my mouth. One of our taglines is people over polluters. But yeah, that's really what it is, and the communities. And I also want to add the word collaboration, to be able to continue the work that we have all done, and especially looking at Zulene and Maurice on this and their long history in the movement, to continue that work.
Thank you. Barbara?
Well, I think it's the environmental justice is a holistic issue. It affects everyone, and especially the most vulnerable communities, but in a sense, we are all vulnerable. And that HB 109 is one way we can directly address it and feel like we're doing something. There's so many different directions we could go, but that's something we can choose right now.
Thank you. And Ms. Zulene?
I was sitting here thinking about the question, and John Legend's song just is ringing in my head. Imagine all those people. Imagine if everybody realized that what is created in what is called these environmental genocidal zones. That's what I'm calling them now. Um, Imagine if everybody understood that what the harms that are put on one community, it just filters out. It filters out. It filters out to everybody. The rich neighborhoods, the not so rich neighborhoods, the minorities, the not minority neighborhoods. Chester borders one of the fourth most wealthiest little boroughs in Pennsylvania. And they share a border with us, and they share the pollution with us. So imagine if everybody had that realization that what you allow to happen to another person, you do also to yourself. And you breathe in it, and your children playing in it, and you're frolicking through your grass covered with particulate matter or lead or mercury. So we all got a lung in this fight. We all got a lung in this fight.
Yes, and that's why I wanted to end today's webinar asking each panelist and you all that question, because when it comes down to today's webinar, again, the webinar was called Environmental Justice in Pennsylvania, and these are some amazing leaders in Pennsylvania right now in the front of the fight, making sure that they're doing the work for you and about you. So again, thank you all for joining in on today's conversation. I want to give a big shout out again to Clean Air Council, Clean Water Action, Conservative Voters of Pennsylvania, EcoPhilly, Marcus Hook's area, a neighbor of public health, and Circle, Chester residents concerned for quality of living. Thank you all for making this conversation today happen. Thank you for showing up for yourselves and for your communities, and of course, the state of Pennsylvania. We appreciate you all. Have a great night and look forward to the next one. Sign up for all of these amazing email lists, newsletters, so you can stay connected as many ways possible. Again, please copy all the links and resources from today's chat to make sure that you have what you need to continue the fight. Thank you so much.
Take care and good evening.
Good night.
Good evening. Good night, everyone.